Today's material, and we'll be doing a little bit at the beginning of the class on Thursday, is a expansion on what's covered in parts, I believe it was 4 and 5 in the curatorial toolkit reading that you have. And so I'll be going over key sections of that today, particularly some of the organizational dynamics and ways to handle organization when you find yourself in the role as a curator, for example, as a freelance. Now, it is a good idea, though, whether you have an exhibition or, for that matter, the curator, when you can work with an institutional producer or partner. So if you can co-curate something and people's egos can stay in check, it really is wonderful to have 2 or 3 minds working on the same project when you all have the goal to disseminate important information for people rather than to enhance your own status. And that way, what it allows you to do is to distribute the intense amount of work involved. You're only working with 5 objects. And by about the 9-week mark, you're going to really start to see the crunch when you have to start to develop your text as well as your labels. And when you can distribute that among a curatorial team, as compared to having to do it all on your own, you find out that that proverbial 5 hands are better than 1. And really, though, for any project, when you're starting out, it's good to try to stay confined to a single gallery or a museum or artist-run space. There are a lot of spaces that actually are run by artists, so they actually generate their own shows and they all work to co-curate within that. But what occurs, for example, if you have galleries that are in different locations, you can still collaborate with others to increase efficiency and to share costs, particularly if an exhibit is going to be traveling. But when you're first starting out, it really is a good idea to keep it as simple as possible. And to start, now what a gallery is generally, because people think of a gallery like an art gallery, but the earlier definitions of gallery are actually a space set aside within a larger context. So if you go, for example, to the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., that you'll see that there, as you're walking through the museum, there are various galleries that are dedicated to different themes. So in one gallery, which is one small section, you'll find the work of Impressionist painters, for example. In one small section, you'll find armor. In one small section, you'll find ceramics. So those are specific galleries within a larger context. So even within a museum space, there are, when you go downtown to the Museum of Contemporary Native American Art, it's the museum, yes, but you'll note that there are various galleries within that museum, and sometimes there are entirely different shows within each of those galleries. So try to think of a gallery as a smaller space within a larger one, and it is better to start in a smaller space and get used to doing things on a small scale, and then expand your experience into working on larger and larger scales. So you really, as an emerging curator, and this is whether you're working for an institution or you're a run-and-gun for hire curator, try to focus on single venue, non-touring public projects first. Right? Generally, a touring project means that it's going to stay in one gallery space or in one museum space for a set amount of time. Then it's going to have to be packaged and shipped to another space where it will be unpacked, it will be presented, and then it will be torn down and sent to another space. That adds a level of complexity that when you're first starting that you don't need. It adds a level of organization that's very difficult to handle. So start on a single venue, one small location, because what that allows you to do by doing these initially, several of these kinds of projects, that you build a track record, as it might be called, that paves the way for other projects that you might want to do. And then when you are applying for funding or you are presenting proposals to larger venues, you can show a record of positive success. And in that way, people will have more faith in what you're doing. So it's like and so in the curatorial toolkit, where it shows you a curator's curriculum vitae, and that vitae includes it's more than a resume. A resume is generally a 1 or 2 page document where you're trying to get a job. A vitae is a documentation of your professional history. So you want to include everything that relates to your curatorial, even as an intern, experience. So when you are applying for any type of funding, it's important to have a vitae. So you know what? It's not too early to start a curriculum vitae right now, which includes what you've done so far. If nothing else, your name, your tribal affiliation, and where you've gone to school to start. Because your curriculum vitae will list your academic credentials as well as your professional credentials. There are a number of, there's an example of a CV in the reading, but there are a number of them online too. So it's important to start building this track record. And that includes even when you're going to be working for various tribal entities, because still someone is putting money up to fund these projects, and they want to have faith in those projects. Right? When you go to buy a car, you really want to have a vitae of the car. And that vitae is the previous owner's maintenance records. I would not buy a used car, which I always buy. I don't believe in buying new cars. I would not buy a used car without a track record, without the maintenance records of that vehicle. It lets you know it's been well maintained. It allows me to have more faith that that vehicle is not going to break down as soon as I drive it off the lot. And so these are the kinds of things we want to be aware of when we are starting our careers. Now I'm going to shift into scheduling, and that's what most of today's material is about. Now, most galleries schedule their exhibition decisions anywhere from 1 to 2 years in advance. So if you are proposing an exhibition to a specific gallery, it's 2013, very small chance, unless something falls through on the part of that museum or gallery and they've got to come up with something really fast. Very little chance of getting something in for this year. Actually, very little chance of getting something in for 2014. Try to think at least 2 years ahead. What that allows you to do is a lot of the legwork, the groundwork, as well as the research ahead of time too, rather than getting the acceptance of a proposal a month before it's supposed to go up. That's a frantic existence to lead. So try to think at least 2 years in advance, because it also allows you to do fundraising. It allows you to get the necessary loans of artistic works or any other type of media, to develop any of the public programming, including educational programming, and any of the other supporting activities, such as artist or professional lectures. Now, this is in museums, in galleries. Many museums actually plan 5 years out, so they already know what they're doing in the year 2018. All right, your major museums are that far ahead because the works that they are presenting are highly desired all around the world. So there's a much larger market competing for the same stuff. So when you're thinking of approaching a major museum, you're actually, if it's 2013, you're thinking actually in terms of 2018 or 19 in presenting a show. Artist-run spaces, generally a year in advance, and you'll still get something in. So for a curator, you're thinking about a timeline that's going to range from the time you conceive the idea to when it's going to be completed. On average, then, if we're looking at from the 1 year from an artist-run space as compared to 5 years for a larger institution, you may be going anywhere between 1 and 3 years. And even in the larger institutions, sometimes schedules change and you may be presented with an opportunity. When you're presented with that opportunity, you really have to stop and ask yourself, can I or we pull this off in this amount of time? That's why it's a good idea to start with small shows first. so that you have an idea of the time frame involved in the various activities, so that you can then budget your time and then think ahead. All right, if it took me this much time to do this exhibit of this type of material, if I was to multiply this number of objects on even the same theme, how much time might this take me? Or for that matter, how much money might it cost? So, suppose your idea, your proposal has been accepted. This is where an important dynamic of follow-through is critical in your mind. That first and foremost, send a thank you letter and confirm not only your commitment to organize the exhibit, but to confirm the commitment of the venue that has accepted the proposal. So, and the letter should include, because some of this stuff is going to be included or part of contractual obligations and negotiations too. So you want to state whether that commitment that's being made is to support, for example, the research that might be involved in developing the concept. You might have presented the concept and have done no research yet. And someone's going to have to pay for that. Are you going to do that on your own, or is the museum going to include that as part of your, or that gallery, are they going to include it as part of your curatorial fee? So you really want to make sure that you're clear on all of the activities that are involved in putting this together. Or for that matter, are they just supporting the production of something that's already been conceived and researched? This all takes time. So your letter should send those initial overtures, because all you've gotten right now is a letter from a gallery or a museum saying, we really like your idea and we'd like to run it in, we'll say, August of 2015. That's all you've got right now, is an approximate date, because it was just August. You've got an approximate year, 2015, but there are no responsibilities that have been delineated at this point. And this is where the Indian thumb wrestling begins. Because it is so critical to clarify the responsibilities of this project, which includes further development on the concept, the exhibition list of objects, the artist and lender contracts, as well as contacts, because the artist may be sending work directly to you, or it may be a gallery that is representing this artist, or a museum or other public venue that holds a work by this artist and is lending it to you. There is responsibility for the curatorial text. Who will be writing that? Is it you or people that you pay? Or is the museum or gallery going to want to do that? Sometimes galleries and museums are very, very strict about who writes the curatorial text, even if you are the curator. They may want final say, as well as the presence for installation and the opening. So the gallery is generally going to handle the loan requests. For example, the exhibition and reproduction permissions, fee negotiations, soliciting, expense quotes, promotion, and the like, because it is the gallery, the physical space, who is going to be responsible for insurance, transportation. It is very often their mailing list, for example, when you're mailing out invitations. They see that as part of their operating budget. But you may at times be asked to take on more responsibilities. So you want to be really clear about what that responsibility is. So you've got the commitment, and you are now going to move toward a contract. And whether a gallery or museum's commitment is verbal or in writing, you really should be clear in the procedural information for the curator, including then when to expect a contract. Because if you haven't got it yet in the mail, you need to ask when it's going to be arriving. So you expect a contract or a letter of agreement, as well as the time frame within a few weeks after the gallery's decision. If you don't have something within, say, a month, you need to take the initiative. So be proactive and ask for those documents so that you are avoiding misunderstandings or any potential conflict in the future. Now, some galleries will send the contracts still in paper form. Others will send them by email as PDFs. You know what a PDF is, right? What do you need to open a PDF? Adobe what? Okay, Adobe Reader, but there's several kinds of readers. Starts with an A? Acrobat. And Acrobat has become sophisticated enough that it will accept digital signatures. Do not do a digital signature. You want to handwrite your signature. You can send the digital as a backup, but you want hard copy of your handwriting. So you print it out and you do 2 copies. One for you, one for the gallery. You sign them both. Because one of the wonderful things about doing something online is it could be intercepted and changed. Or it could be altered after the fact. Now, I would like to think that no museum or gallery would do that. But you really do have to be cautious. So commitment doesn't mean it's certain. That's why you want to be aware of the contract. So be aware also when you're reading a contract that it's written from the perspective of the institution. In other words, they are writing the contract that will maximize their benefit. And often that maximization translates into fiscal responsibility as well as time responsibility. So you want to be aware that if it's written from the institution's perspective, that you want to be able to stand up assertively for your own perspective. And that's where some of the negotiation can occur, because you need to express your own interest. If you don't, you are, whatever you've signed, you are bound to. So read the contract really carefully. Highlight certain stipulations within that contract and negotiate changes if necessary. It is always a good idea to take that contract to a lawyer. Especially if there is wording that you're not quite clear about. Because you may be signing a commitment to something that you don't understand. And it's different in school, all right? Because so many people will read a book, and have you ever highlighted a book? You're reading, you highlight something. Why are you highlighting it? Okay, you're trying to call it out. All right, ideally, especially if it's a word you don't know, you'll go and look it up. Has anyone here ever read a reading for class, saw a word you didn't understand, and just kept right on going? Myself included. Don't do that on a contract. So a document might be a letter of agreement or a more formal contract. And some galleries may actually want to separate out the research components, if there is one. Depends on your proposal. From the exhibition and or publication. In other words, the pre-exhibit, they'll actually sort as a different contract even. And that upon delivery of this material, you then proceed to the next. So in other words, one part has to be complete before you move to the next. Regardless if it's a letter or a contract, you're generally going to get a working project title as well as a brief description of the project. You're going to get a timeline for the research, which includes you may be needing to travel to do the research if it is your responsibility. It may include a timeline of when you are supposed to submit interim reports, progress reports, and it may include the final exhibition proposal. You can expect a description of what is going to be required for the completed exhibition proposal, including a detailed concept description, because what you're filling out for this class is actually an evaporated version of what you would do in larger venues. You want a list of the works, the logistical information, including the hardware and light that would be needed, the space that would be needed, and a detailed budget. You want the agreed upon fees and expenses, and a payment schedule, that you may be getting a payment in 3 months and then the complete payout in 9 months. That you may have staggered payment schedule, so it may be done in increments. Or you may not get payment until the exhibition is complete. This is why you read your contract, because if you feel you need information or you need financial support in order to be able to do the research, travel, various kinds of fees, then that's something you want to negotiate for out front. That the museum will cover those fees, and that's taken out of the total fee that's given to you as the curator for that project. And then you really want to clear that statement of the gallery or that venue's obligation to produce the exhibit once they have approved the final proposal. This is where, in many situations, and it's not just in tribal cultural centers and in small museums, that you've really got to become extremely retentive. Because this is a contract. And so many people will say, oh, we said we'll do this. And you may be found in a difficult situation by not being assertive enough. And it can create some discomfort, particularly, for example, you're working for your tribe. And people may even use slanderous terms on you, saying you're acting just like a Belaganda because you want a contract. Don't let them shame you. In a professional business, it's professional behavior. So once you've got that contract signed, sealed, and delivered, you can proceed with the work to complete the show. And this is where organization is going to be so important. So you're going to be continuing research possibly. You may be doing more studio visits or gallery visits because there may be other works you're trying to achieve or obtain. More communications with artists or other institutions. You're going to be reviewing artworks under consideration. You may still be sending out calls for work, calls for art. And we'll have a separate class set aside on some of these types of documents that you would be generating, such as the call for artists or call for artwork. And we'll look at a few examples, especially when you're working with contemporary artists. So if you are going to be getting work on loan, now you might, if you're working in your own tribal center, you may already have the objects there. You may already have the work there. But if you are doing this as a freelance, you may be in a certain space gathering works from all over the country or possibly all over the world. So you want to be able to secure these types of agreements, at least in principle, at least get a verbal consent initially regarding the work that you need and the loans that are going to be necessary. And as you are doing this, you're starting to create an exhibition list as well as venue approval. So the procedure is going to be a little bit like a formal loan request, and we'll look at those types of documents in the class too. And this procedure, and when you are doing these type of requests, you want to make sure that they're written. And any letters that you send to any other institutions, you want to note that you're in the process of producing for a venue, and you want to see if that particular artist or lender is willing to participate in this show. So it's not only a call to artists, it may be a call to other institutions for work that they have by certain artists in their facility. This also lets you know if the work is available before you finalize the exhibition proposal. And with artist approval, once you suppose you have contacted the artist or the institution, all right, you want to let people know that their work has been accepted. For that matter, that you're acknowledging that they have accepted the invitation to have their work included, even if the work is coming from another venue, because you may have, for example, Dan Naminga has his own gallery downtown. But there may be a piece of his at the Herb Museum. And so while it's Dan Naminga, you're still contacting the Herd. You still want to contact Dan Naminga to let him know this piece is coming. Why do you think he'd want to do that? If it's no longer his. I know there's a word coming out. For what? All right, you might need artist information. All right, so for his vita as an artist. Why else? Okay, Dan is still alive. So why else? Yeah, what better place to get the exact descriptions of the objects, all right? Which is really helpful, for example, when you're doing the copy, the wall copy, whether it be for a label, because the Herd will have the label. They may not have really great text about that particular work. So the type of supporting information, the story. Why else? He's alive. He's in Santa Fe. Why else? He came to IIA. So he went to IIA. He's still alive. And he's in Santa Fe. Why else? So you wouldn't be doing plagiarism? It's a good guess. There may be actually various contractual things involved, which includes where something can be shown, or whether it can be moved, or the cost of insurance. Why else? Which is better to see, a picture of Bigfoot or Bigfoot? Well, they say Bigfoot really stinks, so I might go for the picture too. But you can have Dan come to the opening. What better way to hear about a work than from the artist themselves? So you want approval, and that can be informally, initially by telephone, but it is a good idea to follow up with email or regular mail. You want to initiate in writing, particularly if you are unknown. so that it gives you the opportunity to let the other institutions or artists know what you've done so far, what you intend to do, and any accomplishments you've had up to that point. Never say, "This is my first time." And it may be. It's unnecessary information. Speak confidently. You didn't hear that? I was not here. So you want to include your vita, any details about the venue. It's a good idea to start developing right now your own Facebook page, your own LinkedIn page, your own personal blog, your own website. Now, the difference between a Facebook page as compared to a blog, because they both operate in many ways similar. Only on Facebook now, I like to call it friendly spam. When you look at people's Facebook pages, it's mostly crap. You know, what restaurant they ate at and, you know, who their friends are, which is fine. You know, it's part of just staying in touch. There are many organizations and individuals who are making a living selling off of Facebook through social networking. So it's a good idea to have the friendlier face, but if you're on Facebook, you're going to have all this other, not only spam from your friends, but spam from all the other organizations, because they look at your interests and they put stuff on your site whether you want it or not. Anyone here have a Facebook page? You got stuff on there you wouldn't put on there willingly? Because people can now post to your site and those little advertisements that pay for Facebook. Or you're presented with things in your timeline. So that's a little more friendly part, and Facebook is interactive. You put something up and people can respond to it. On a blog is dedicated specifically to putting information out there, generally quality information, and you can do it, a blog about art. And then people can respond, and you create a dialogue, a professional dialogue and a friendly dialogue. As compared to a website, which tends to be less interactive. So various levels of interaction. I tend to see a personal or professional blog as being more professionally oriented. Facebook is a combination of it all, and Facebook is becoming an amazing way to start doing social networking as well as social marketing, and then your own website. Think about having all of them. An electronic presence. If you do not, you have already joined the list of T-Rex, Brontosaurus, Triceratops, Archaeopteryx. You're extinct. And it's not too late, Judith. When you bought that Mac, you had no idea what ride you were in for. Because that Mac can do all of that, including the movies. So the scheduling, pre-exhibition, you want to have a working timeline based on a critical path. A critical path is the list of objectives that need to be accomplished toward the overall goal. The overall goal is the final exhibit. You have objectives that you achieve along the way. So that critical path is what needs to be accomplished in what order. So you want to have a clear idea in your timeline so you can start to manage your own time and tasks with deadlines that are achievable. So you want to know, if you're working with a team or working with a gallery, who is responsible for what tasks in which location by what deadline. And you want to make sure, if you are working with a team, that everyone has a copy of that scheduling, and be sure to check in with everyone at least once a week. I am such a boob, and I tell people not to do this, and I just did it. You'll know I always have really large text in my slides so you can see them. And I completely forgot. I could read this from my computer screen. Tasha, I know you can't read this. So I apologize. I'll put this up on the class site, all right, because what it is in essence, and I'll show you varying levels of detail, because this is breaking it down by what needs to be done, for example, 6 months out from the opening, 3 months out, 2 months out, 1 month out, 2 weeks out from the opening. For example, once you're on the downside of the slope. And some of the activities you might see would be at 6 months out, the finalized exhibition title, the finalized list of artists, the exhibition dates, when the reception is going to be, as well as who's going to pay for what. At 3 months out, you would want your paperwork done, such as the contract, possibly, the exhibition inventory. And that contract, when I'm saying possibly, is because you might have had a separate research contract as compared to actually hanging the show. You're going to want your artist statements, resumes, and then your press material as part of the paperwork. Public relations by 2 months out. You don't want your public relations stuff going out, particularly in a small venue, a year ahead of time. Major exhibits will do that. These blockbuster things that are going to be done. They'll send their stuff out a year ahead of time. Most people don't have an attention span that long. And when you're doing things locally, you're looking at most 2 months away from the opening. So people will set their own calendars aside. 1 month out, the exhibition prep, because then it's going to start to become really crunch time, and then the installation, generally within 2 weeks. So I'll put this handout up so you get an idea. The same with this one. There are other ways to delegate responsibilities too. This is called an action chart. And you want to have several ways to keep track of who's doing what, when, and where. And for example, if you break just the last month of an exhibit down, who's responsible for accomplishing what task? You might have the date and the task. And then if you have 4 people on the team, who is responsible for that task by January 4th? A week later, who is responsible for the curatorial statement? By the 18th, who is supposed to have the press release done? By the 25th, who's going to contact television, radio, and the like? So there are various levels of organization and ways to visually as well as temporally represent who is doing what. It's important to stay this organized and to make sure everyone has a shared copy. That's one of the wonderful things now about Outlook, is that if everyone is queued to each other's Outlook calendar, you can make sure that everyone has the same set of dates and times appearing. So no one can say, but I didn't get that message. Because as soon as if you are the master curator, as soon as you hit that meeting request, it goes out to everyone on that list. So whether it be the various user groups that you have in Outlook or any of the other type of calendar functions and email functions that you have. And generally, I would suggest by about 3 months out, you want a project master list. This is the document that's going to record the progress of the project's organization. Now, you could have it from the inception, from the time you're doing the research, even from 3 years out. If it's a long project, you might need it that long. Right? And always keep it in a hard copy as well as a digital format. And never, never save something to just a flash drive. Get in the habit with digital information of saving not only to a flash drive. This thing here has 16 gigabytes on it. That is so darn small now. What do you think could happen to this? Yeah, it could go down the drain. Sure, it's small. I could lose it if I don't have backup. So this one's got the same information on it. This one has pictures of all the saints and demons that I've ever encountered. So I'm protected by everything on here. I got Christian saints on here. I got Quetzalcoatl. I mean, I got so many saints and other kind of images from around the world. They call them scapulas if you're a Christian. It's this saint's medal you wear to protect you. Man, I'm protected by so many saints and everything on this one. Right here. It's all digital. And it's backed up on the other one. Double protected. This is just one level. You're backed up on your computer hard drive, back up on an external hard drive too. One of the things in particular with USB flash drives is that they are prone to electronic charges that could either wipe them or make it so they're unreadable. So it's always a good idea when you're using a flash drive to eject it. Don't just pull it out of the computer, because if you just pull it out, you might actually do things that are destructive to the flash drive. You only have to lose everything once. So be redundant in your backup, and that includes of your master list. Any documentation that is associated with that exhibit, you want it backed up at least 3 places. And now they have cloud storage, so you can back up online too, for retrieval anywhere in the world. Because you might be flying to Paris to do research, and you forgot your USB drive or your external hard drive. If you've got it backed up on the cloud, you can walk into any internet cafe, and there it is, right there. And have it backed up hard copy. So this master list that records the project's progress. It gives you an overview of what's been accomplished, as well as what still needs to be accomplished, what's still missing. It lets you know about decisions, the participation, and loans. And as the other kind of information starts to arrive, you constantly are updating this document. And you can format it as a chart, as you'll see in the document I put on the website. It could be a database, such as a Microsoft Access database. It could be a word processing document or an Excel spreadsheet. Whatever you are doing, if you are using like Microsoft Office, and I don't know if the Mac suite does that or not, but it's called Track Changes. All right, it's a little subroutine you activate. All right, and so anytime you change that document, you want to make sure that you've got track changes enabled, because it will show you what was before and then what you just changed. Every time you update your document, you also want to date the document. So if you did an update, we'll say you do all your updates on every Monday. So you might have one document that reads Project Master List for the Mojo Nixon Show. February 18th, 2013. You're updating it today. Project list for Mojo Nixon Show. February 25th, 2013. So you want to make sure that each one has a specific date associated with it too. So when you are searching for information, it's very easy to sort. Some of the items that you could include on the master list could be the last name of the artist in alphabetical order if it's a group show. The label information for the artwork or artworks from that artist, which include the title, the date, the medium, the dimensions, the collection or the collector credit line, the provenance, who it came from. You want to include the dimensions if they are framed objects, and notes regarding framing requirements if you are going to be having to do this on your own. Any of the other type of art prep tasks that might need to be done, because if you're doing solicitations from living artists, they might literally be pulling something off the easel and sending it to you unframed. So you want to have those types of specifications involved. If it's three-dimensional work, you want to, if it's going to be freestanding, you're noting the space that it occupies, or if it's going to be on a pedestal, the size of the pedestal. Any of this type of work that's going to be involved. Any of the equipment and other type of technical or installation requirements, which includes lighting or track lighting. You want to include insurance value, contact information for the artist as well as the galleries that might be representing them. And now there are some artists that actually would rather have you contact an assistant of theirs or a dealer once they've agreed to the project. And if it's being lent by another institution, you want the lender's contact information, as well as shipping details, where something will be picked up, any type of the contact information for shipping. Is crating required, etc. And these are all items that can be included on the master list. Depending on the show, this roster of items could change. For example, if you are curating a digital show, or if the show that you are curating has digital work in it, you may need to have, have you all seen that screen outside of the orange room? You might need a large screen, a large LCD or LED screen. And be clear on whether you're going to have an LCD or LED, as well as the dimensions. Do you need a sound system if there's audio involved? Any of these. And a way to lay out, and I'll put this on the site too, all right, your master list, as this is shown here in the columns, is the name of the lender, the art, the collector, or the dealer, any of the contact information. You got the artist's name, the number of works that are on loan, the insurance value, the types of visuals that were received if they're sending slides or the like, the biographical information, the framing or other type of material needed. Has the loan request been approved? What kind of arrangements have been made for shipping? Has it actually been shipped? And who needs to be credited? Is there someone who's assisted with this? Or is it coming from someone's certain collection? Any of that kind of information, or any other type of comments that are necessary to keep you on track. And this is quite specific, and it really does assist in keeping things organized. And what it really does assist too is if you've got several individuals working on the same project, you make sure that you're staying coordinated and that this list is constantly updated, and as soon as it is updated, it's instantly shared with the other individuals in the team or in the organization. And in addition, other kinds of information to be accumulating is you want to start to have a list of the people that you're going to acknowledge in the show's opening. And it might be either at the launch of the project or possibly in a publication. Not only the people, but the various organizations who may have donated time or money. You want to make sure to thank them. You may be creating a list of anyone who helped in the actual research and production. Believe it or not, if there are caterers who have helped, thank them. You also want to make sure that you are creating a mailing list for exhibition invitations. You may have your own. You may be working with the gallery or museum, but there needs to be some type of mailing list. And invitations still do go out in hard copy. So that mailing list is email as well as hard copy. It doesn't hurt to be redundant. Only as a curator, try to be creatively redundant. So how do you send the same notice or the same reminder slightly different each time? Creative redundancy.